So, hi everybody, my name is Erin Young. I'm based on the mid-east coast of Australia. It's such a pleasure to be here. I couldn't help but submit something for this unique premier conference, particularly here in Australia. There's not hordes of us who are working with sociocracy, so it's really important to be able to connect in this way. So today I'm going to share a little about the 6 thinking hats of Edward de Bono and how it can be used as a plug-in for, or an app for, the picture forming proposal generation process that we all know and love, or some of us may know and love, and some of us may be intrigued and not know about it so much just yet. So a background on me, I'm a sociocracy trainer and consultant, still growing in my skill and ability, but claiming those titles these days. And I'm also a dynamic groups facilitator, in amongst other things. And so I'm actually want to experiment with this online forum because I haven't done too many of these. I'm curious, and I'm wondering if you can, those who have video and who are willing, if you can show by hand gauge on your video screen like this, what if you've experienced the 6 thinking hats before. So that might be if you've heard about them or you've used them. So up on the top of the screen is yes, mid screen is maybe, bottom of the screen is no, have no idea. So if you can put your hand top, yes, mid, maybe, bottom, no. Okay, so I'm just flicking. We've got, if you can just hold your hand there for a sec, I'm going to flick between the screen. We've got a couple of mids, a couple of bottoms. Yeah, we're kind of mid-bottom. Okay, and actually I'm in the middle. I'm not super experienced with this, so thanks. That's interesting. Hopefully you've all got to see where other people are at as well. Nice to see some of those grey name screens come alive for a moment there and join in. Thanks for joining. So Edward de Bono is, I'm pretty sure he's still alive. He's a fairly well-revered academic who's been in the halls of Harvard and Cambridge and all sorts of things like that, and worked with big companies. And his thing that he's brought to the world is lateral thinking. He's written many, many books on lateral and parallel thinking, and has really offered many tools to help humans think outside the box. I mean, I think he wrote the definition of how to think outside the box, and he's written several definitions of that. So the 6 thinking hats is one of those tools that he has created and shared with the world. And it's something that, as I said, I haven't used extensively myself, but I have used it, and I do lean on these thinking hats as a way to help me orient myself in conversations and discussions. So it feels really valuable to share it in this way. So I'm going to share my screen and take you to my slideshow. Bear with me. And I'm going to try and make it big if I can. All right, let's go. Okay. Can someone chime in if you can see what my title screen of my slideshow? I just hear some yeses or nos.
No.
No? Okay. Okay, I need to try another tactic here. So the 6 thinking hats are a framework for being creative with and patterning how we think about an issue or a topic. So in picture forming, we use that process as a way of exploring what we know about a situation that we're working with, where often troubleshooting, problem solving, with picture forming. We're finding a way to move forward where there's a need for clarity, and where there might not be one obvious proposal to move forward with. So the 6 hats links in really well with that. That can be used as a way to expand what picture forming is. So in Sociocracy, we work in rounds. And I'm going to explain what each of the hats are in a moment to help you get a grasp of what they are. And they can effectively be used as a round in the picture forming process. So the 6 hats come from this book, The 6 Thinking Hats, which Goodreads.com describes as a devastatingly simple technique based on the brain's different modes of thinking. The intelligence, experience, and information of everyone is harnessed to reach the right conclusions quickly. These principles fundamentally change the way you work and interact. They've been adopted by businesses and governments around the world to end conflict and confusion in favor of harmony and productivity. So, and I have the book here as well. It's nice to have something hard copy. So here is a mind map I've gleaned off the great internet, which shows a fairly good summary of what the 6 hats are. So we have the white hat, yellow hat, the green hat, the red hat, the black hat, and the blue hat. And you know, all of the information is there for you to grab as you wish. And I'm going to run through them fairly briefly because time is ticking along. And I'm going to tune into each one of them more specifically. So as we go through this, imagine these hats being the topic of a round in picture forming. So we're all sitting in a picture forming situation. We're wanting to glean information to help us understand what we're working with. So first of all, we'll go to the white hat. So if we have a white hat round in picture forming, we would be gleaning information from the group that is neutral, it's objective, the facts, what we know, what we don't know, figures, dates. It's kind of like if you imagine a nurse with her chart in a hospital saying, okay, this is what the heart rate is, this is what we've got, this is what we don't have. So it's really allowing us to gather a baseline of information where we then identify what gaps there are in that baseline information. And as that the mind map says, there are no opinions in this space, but rather, what do we know, what don't we know? This is, you know, I think all of these hats, all of the archetypes of these hats would appear in a standard picture forming round anyway. And what this offers us is more specific focus on each of these patterned areas to help us really hone in on them. So the next hat we're looking at is the red hat. The red hat is about feelings and emotions. So for whatever topic or scenario we're looking at, what are the feelings? What are the hunches? What are the intuitions about that? How does the group feel about it? How does an individual feel about it? How might a community feel about a particular situation? So we can go from macro to micro with looking at what are the feelings and emotions that might be elicited by whatever this scenario is. Okay. Moving on to the black hat. This is probably the hat, if anyone knows about any of the 6 thinking hats, it's the black hat thinking. I'm pretty sure a lot of us would have heard this. Whether we know it's attached to the 6 thinking hats or not is another thing. So black hat thinking in a black hat round and picture forming would be about, what do we need to be cautious about in this scenario? What do we need to take care about? What is the logic? What are the, and as this says, what are the downsides of the negatives? What's not working, so to speak? What can we evaluate about it? What what do we know are the boundaries to this situation? So this is a really valuable hat to utilize, and as Bono says in his book, it's certainly not one to overuse. And this, I think in our modern world, this is the hat that is quite often defaulted to. So I really recognize it having its place in the forest of hats here. And so we're going to move on to the next one, which is the yellow hat. I'll say that there is no necessary order of hats. The facilitator can choose which order of hats or choose to only use some of the hats as well. So the yellow hat brings in the optimism and the positives to a scenario. What is working well? What's feasible? What's valuable? What are the benefits that are coming out of a situation? What's bright and cheery? You might imagine the sun shining in this one. What do we have to work with that's of benefit and of resource to us in this situation? So it's really gleaning out, you know, a polarity to what the black hat is thinking in a lot of ways. Okay, we're moving on to the green hat. Now the green hat's a little atypical for picture forming because this does go into the proposal generation realm. So this is probably one that wouldn't be so utilized in picture forming, but I still think there might be a place for it, and it might have a place of not only about what are the possibilities or alternatives, because that's very much proposal generation, but what's fertile. And Bono talks about the green hat being like the earth. What's growing here? What is the potential? It's almost like, how do you relate it to a seed? What could come through in this scenario, in this situation? So reiterating, there's a fine line with the proposal generation, and that, you know, that could be craftily worked with. And the green hat could be particularly put on in proposal generation time. And I haven't highlighted the blue hat, but hopefully you can imagine there being a nice orange circle around that blue hat there. And the blue hat's really valuable and important, and it's actually one to wear, that's useful to wear at the start as a starting round and as a closing round if you were to do this in picture forming. And the blue hat is the big picture. It's the summary. It is the overview. What do we know? What do we know already? What are the conclusions when we've wrapped up? If we were an eagle in the sky, what would we be seeing on Earth level? It's, you know, there's some similarities to white hat there, but it can be used to bring us in. This is the who, what, when, where, why of the scenario, and the summary of where we've come to in our 6 thinking hats. And staying on that one, so that's an overview of the hats, and you know, what essence they bring to drawing out the collective wisdom in a picture forming round. And to speak of the merits of why the 6 thinking hats enriches picture forming, is that, for one thing, they work from patterns to details, and humans we're pattern recognizing species. So by helping us to take our thinking into specific areas through the patterns of the hat, so we're all in yellow hat mode right now, and there can be a generative process of hearing other people say yellow hat things and go, oh yeah, okay, yep, I didn't think of that, and here's another positive that I'm realizing that's coming out of the situation. So working from patterns to details. And also another merit of the 6 hats is the using and valuing diversity. So of course diversity comes in a group by the nature of it being a group. We all tend to have different ways of thinking and conceptualizing whatever's happening in a scenario. And the 6 hats really allows us to have a framework for that diversity in our thinking as well. So some people might be stronger black hat thinkers, some people might be stronger red hat thinkers, and yellow hat thinkers, and so on. So it's really being thorough in that diversity also. what else? I think aside from it allowing a breadth of collective intelligence through that diversity, I think the six hats works really well and really aligns with being effective, transparent, and equivalent. You know, I think it allowed the rounds of sociocracy plug into these hats really naturally and allow the conversations. And as Edward de Bono talks in his book, he describes them not being used in rounds, but he specifically notes that meetings go a lot quicker by using the hats. So that's what we're working with in Sociocracy, is to be effective, to really get into the details effectively, to have the transparency. The hats allow us to have different perspectives and not all come from, you know, just the black and the white hat. We're actually able to have a bigger whole systems perspective on a scenario. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. And really accentuating that this is a way of activating the dynamic group intelligence, even more than Sociocracy already does. That's something I'm really keen to support in the world. So you can see on the screen my details. My email address is erin.n.young@gmail.com. Current website is anotherdivinefractal.com, soon to be erinyoung.net. And I do sociocracy training, consultation, and dynamic group facilitation and mediation and wordsmithery here in Australia and online. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone if you want to follow up with me after the seminar. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back into the group, and I believe it will be question time. Now, I don't know how to stop sharing my screen. I'm not seeing a stop share screen button. I'm seeing someone pointing to the bottom.
Should be at the top of your screen. You might have to mouse over the top for it to pop up.
Okay, not. There we go, stop share. Alrighty. Okay, so I think we're going into question time or comments time. So I'm actually a fan of popcorn style in this sort of scenario. So if you have a question or a comment, feel free to unmute and put it out there.
Can I go first then, Erin?
Please do.
Hi, it's Kimmy. I'm just really interested that I don't know what I'm sorry, I'm going to delve in a little bit of the work that you're talking about more than the six thinking hats, just because I do find that what you've said about them is really informative, and it's kind of something I need to go away and look at a little bit more anyway with my own kind of thing. But I'm really intrigued by your dynamic group facilitator and the fact of mediation, and I suppose my question is really around about how much you feel that mediation is such an important part, and also a little bit of what is dynamic group facilitator. And I'm sorry if other people know this, but it's kind of a new one to me, so thanks.
Okay, so mediation, the mediation I practice and know is NVC, nonviolent communication-based mediation. So it's need-based communication. I won't say too much about it more than that, but that'll give you some clues to go and look up online. And I recommend looking up dynamicgroups.com.au. That's the website of my colleague Robin Clayfield, my colleague and mentor, teacher and friend Robin Clayfield, who's pioneered, she's known as a permaculture pioneer for anyone who knows permaculture. And she's created a vast array of really interesting dynamic group facilitation techniques. So she's doing some interesting stuff there. Thanks, Kimmy.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, Francine.
I have a quick question, practical question. When what did you find when you're doing picture forming and the rounds? And did you have to basically explain to people what the hats were about, or how did you introduce that? Did you give an overview? We're going to use 7 hats now, or whatever, the 6 hats? How did you make it real for the people?
Yeah, so one approach I've seen with the 6 hats is to actually have hats made up. So this is really using dynamic groups process, and the hat could be used as a talking stick in a way. And so the hats were all different shapes. The white hat was like a nurse's hat. Let me think, the yellow hat was like a sunbeam sort of styled hat. So the hats kind of took on the form of the essence of what the round is. So yeah, and giving a briefing and having handouts and having it available on the table and the screen so people can reference. I think that mind map's also a really useful tool. People can continually be referencing what they're about. We probably have about 3 minutes.
Sorry, just to say another little bit, Erin, but it's just also, I think creativity is such an important part of also like kind of when you're starting to try and think of the world differently. And I think it is about trying to incorporate many things. Like when I was asking about the mediation, I'm doing MVC myself. And so, yeah, that's something that I'm already doing, but I'm really interested in other forms of mediation, which are much more based around about people understanding that it's about what you do when things are not going well, rather than how you work on when things are going good, kind of thing. So I'm kind of trying to come from a different perspective, so thanks for that. But I think the creativity is such an important part of actually us being able to tap into other parts of our brains through new language and all that sort of stuff. So thank you for that. It's really great to know that that's actually been engaged and connected with.
Yeah, cool, Kimmy. And I think the 6 hats and sociocracy as well is inherently mediating. These processes are mediating because of how they're set up, their whole systems thinking. So they engage the fullness of who we are as humans, or they're attempting to at least. And yeah, I think the world needs a lot more of that. Yeah.
So Erin, what would you recommend? This is Mukunda from Florida. And what would you recommend be the immediate resources that we can tap into as facilitators who wants to experiment with the 6 hats?
So you can find, I don't know if this is back to front, it probably is, but you'll see it in my slides. Edward de Bono's 6 Thinking Hats. It gives the rundown, the details on what each of the hats are. You'll also find it online because it's actually quite a well-recognized approach and technique. You'll find the mind maps online as well by doing a simple web search. So, I mean, that's my first port of call is go and become familiar with the patterns of the hats. And then play with them. Really, it's I'm sure there's a lot of ways to use them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
sorry about the feedback. One other note is Edward de Bono in his work created the 6 hats, thinking hats, along with a lot of other tools, and first introduced them in a book called Serious Creativity. And almost all of the rest of his work is fleshing out different chapters in Serious Creativity. So you have one chapter devoted to the 6 thinking hats, and then he has a book later for it and a classroom curricula for it. So if you're trying to familiarize yourself with Edward de Bono's work, something I have found helpful is his original book, Serious Creativity.
wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Edward de Bono is prolific. He has got many books. They're around. Okay, so we're on the 1-minute countdown here. So maybe we can finish with a hand gauge. We can go back to this and measure how familiar do you feel now with the 6 thinking hats? If you can go, the top is like, yeah, really familiar, middle is kind of, and bottom is no. Okay, yeah, we're kind of like more mid now, more mid to high. So it feels like this has been beneficial for you all. So that's great. Thank you. Thanks for joining in, and this has been really exciting to kick off Prometheus. So thanks for being here with me. And thank you, Jerry, for having me.